That's right. The Dynasty Roundtable is back. Seth is back. Papa D is back in the house, back in charge. Now, Tyler and Matt Babbage, shout out to you guys. You guys killed it last episode, giving those sophomore breakout candidates. Very good episode. If you did not get a chance to watch it, you definitely should go back and check it out after this episode, because on this episode, Matt and I don't know, we might be butting heads based on the rankings that I'm seeing here.
Absolutely.
So there might be some debate here, but we're going to break down our running back rankings. We're going to get into some ambiguous backfields. But first of all, Matt, how's it going tonight? How you feeling?
Feeling great. It's June 12th today, which means we are just shy of 2 months or 3 months away from the NFL season kicking off. So we're approaching that 90-day mark. It's getting closer and closer. Every day that anticipation builds. Draft season for redraft is upon us, and the sun is shining brighter. The days are better, and it's because football season is approaching. So I'm doing incredible. And like you said, we appear to have some differences in our running back ranking. So this is going to make for an interesting conversation.
Yeah, we want to hear from you as we go through these rankings. We're also going to be discussing our tiers, because it says tiers in the show, but so I just want to let everybody know right away. It won't exactly be tiers, but we're going to be talking through our tiers as we go. So it kind of will be, it kind of won't be. So I don't want to give any false advertisement there, but we will eventually have tiers. We just have rankings, and we're going to talk through our tiers as the show goes along. But without further ado, let's hit the bumper and let's get into it. All right, and I will bring up the bumper, or not the bumper, but so you can't see us. This is live television. Thank you for the assist there, Mr. Babbage. So this is it. We're actually, gone are the days of the spreadsheet, and hello to the single-use tier on tier maker. So here we go. And the differences are going to start right off the bat, and I want to talk about this. And I don't really have a strong opinion, so I'm interested to hear what you say. But I'm just going to throw up the first two running backs, because I feel as though it's consensus, and somebody can let me know in the chat. But we have Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall 1 and 2. But the difference is that you have Breece Hall at number 1, and I have Bijan Robinson at number 1. So walk me through this, because I'm the biggest Breece Hall guy ever. Iowa State, he was taken in the second round. If there was any running back that should have joined Bijan Robinson in the first round, it should have been Breece Hall. But talk me through the rationale, Breece Hall over Bijan.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, where if you have Bijan 1, Breece 1, it's hard to laugh or mock at having one over the other. But for me, my bullishness on Breece Hall is primarily centered around where I project the touch distribution to be in these backfields. So obviously, Bijan, the whole Atlanta offense is taking a massive step forward with their change in offensive coordinator, as well as the arrival of Kirk Cousins. But where that's bad for Bijan is he had a 17.4-ish% target share, over a 17% target share last year. Kyle Pitts had only a 17% target share. So I do anticipate more targets going to Kyle Pitts next year. Kirk Cousins, historically a quarterback that gets 3 pass catchers involved in the game that aren't running backs. Think last year, Addison / KJ Osborne alongside Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. And so with Bijan Robinson, last year, Bijan 8 touchdowns, Breece 9 touchdowns. While it can seem that Breece Hall should be expecting negative touchdown regression, we have to remember that this offense is also taking a step forward with Aaron Rodgers. And there were quite a few opportunities in the goal line or the red zone where Breece Hall was kind of tackled just short. And to think he was, 33rd in total red zone touches last year with 9 touchdowns, that kind of is a testament to how well he is at making these chunk plays. And so looking at the Jets receiving core, Mike Williams is there outside of Garrett Wilson. I think he can push for a 20% target share because that's historically where he's been if he's healthy all year. Tyler Conklin is somewhat of a force, not necessarily anyone who's been known to command targets. So I can see Bijan's target share falling closer to 12 to 14% in this offense, where Breece Hall, I think, has a real chance of finishing with a 17% target share again this year, because in an Aaron Rodgers offense, I don't think we're going to see, first of all, I don't think we're going to see a lot of the downfield throws. So coming off that Achilles tear, is he going to be taking a bunch of deep shots to Mike Williams? I tend to think he's going to be doing a lot of check downs, a lot of short area work. Malachi Corley is going to be a factor in those situations, but I think there's going to be a lot of just dump offs to Breece Hall because of the structure of this offense. Atlanta is much more suited for playing an even keeled downfield offense, health between the quarterbacks remaining equal. So I expect a dip in receiving opportunity for Bijan Robinson, and that's kind of the tiebreaker for me, because they're both going to get a lion's share of their carries. They're both going to get an insane amount of rushing attempts. I think the offenses are going to be similarly paced to where they should see similar red zone goal line numbers. So expect similar touchdowns. So I think this is one of the tightest RB1 races in seasonal fantasy leagues preseason that we've seen in quite some time. And truly, it's just a slight tiebreaker in receiving opportunity this year that has me putting Breece Hall number one. And when it comes to having the RB1 in Dynasty, it's very short-term focused. So if Bijan ends up being the guy, the RB, it's going to immediately flip-flop. So this has nothing to do with career trajectories. These are both amazing bell cow backs. This is simply where I view the opportunity shares breaking down in the short term.
It's fair because, and like I said, when it comes to these upper tier running backs or upper tier players in general, these are generally hills that I'm not going to die on because both of these guys are going to be super productive. It's kind of like what's your preference? And Breece Hall last year, and this is kind of incredible, they used the RB2 last year, RB6 in fantasy points per game, played in all 17 games. And we were astonished by the number of receptions that Bijan Robinson had. He had 58 receptions. But Breece Hall solidified himself as a pass-catching running back out of the backfield, 76 receptions last year. So both these running backs can catch the ball out of the backfield. Your argument is very strong. I'm going to, for now, stick with Bijan, but it's not the layup that I thought it was, because really the Atlanta offense is under the assumption that, Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be the rising tide that lifted all boats because Marcus Mariota was that terrible. And when you dig into the numbers, yeah, he was bad, but he wasn't like as bad, I think, as some people think. When you dig into the advanced metrics, like, don't get me wrong, he was bad, but when you look at the catchable target rate, it's not atrocious like the Jets situation was. Like the Jets situation for Garrett Wilson and others, and Breece Hall, you can throw him in there, was god awful with their backup quarterbacks. It was just horrendous. Zach Wilson and company. So Aaron Rodgers doesn't even have to be good for Breece Hall to have a similar effect, right? The similar rising tide is going to lift Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall to fantasy glory, assuming he's good coming off the Achilles and he's older, 40 years old, but he can't be he cannot be as bad as what we saw last year. So that you would think that, yes, the weighted opportunity is going to be there for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, but Another thing too, like as you were talking, both these running backs are in systems where the quarterbacks are coming off of torn Achilles. So that's, that might not mean anything, but it's interesting. And it's just funny how these narratives work, because the narrative in Atlanta is, oh my God, Drake London's going to be amazing. Oh my God, not the steam is less high for Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, fantastic. I don't feel as though there's as much steam for New York, and that could just be me misreading the situation. But Brees Hall is pretty consistently the RB2, and you can make, like you just made, a solid case for him to be the RB1, not just in Dynasty, but in redraft too, because I mean, really, there's similar ages. So to Bijan Robinson's 22, Brees Hall's 23. So that's, again, these are very similar players. So I like it. I like a lot of what you said, and I don't know if we have anybody in the chat, and nobody in the chat's weighing in here. Let us know what you think in this battle. That's not really a battle between Bijan Robinson and Brees Hall.
To close it out, and it's going to sound, it might sound stupid on the surface, but or overly simple, but it's going to come down to who gets the friendlier bump from touchdowns and efficiency. So last year, Brees Hall had 16.6 weighted opportunities per game. Bijan had 15.5, and we even felt like he was getting held back a little bit. So progressing offenses, progressing roles, year two players, I expect them to be pretty neck and neck in terms of their weighted opportunities per game, which is not just their opportunities, but where and how they're getting the opportunities. So if one happens to have, a 13 touchdown year where the other has a 9 touchdown year, that's going to be the difference. And predicting that, unfortunately, is next to impossible, which is why they're smack dab next to each other in redraft leagues right now, because no one really knows, or no one's confident enough in the RB1, RB2 debate to have consensus lean truly one way or the other.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. And I'm gonna throw up. We were kind of boring with our next two, but I think it's the right call with Jahmyr Gibbs at 3, Christian McCaffrey at 4. I guess we could talk about the fact that Christian McCaffrey's 27. But Christian McCaffrey feels like one of these running backs that's just gonna transcend time. Yeah, he's dealt with some injuries in the past.
He's
But
27 years old. Like, when did that become? He's not even that far off the wrong side of the RB age curve.
I know,
You know what I mean? Like,
it's
and it's
weird.
not.
But you know what I'm talking about, though.
No,
Some people
100%.
are
100%.
like, and I think it's these agists out there. Well, he's 28. He's 28 years old. He just turned 28.
A little bit
But
worse,
it's
but
these,
still.
but it's we everybody. It's like with Derrick Henry. Everybody is trying to predict the end, the cliff. Oh, like Mr. Nostradamus. I am the only one that knows when Derrick Henry is going to stop producing for fantasy football. Don't be that guy. Don't even jump in that pool. I'm not jumping in the pool with Christian. That's gonna sound weird. That would be a nice bit for the producer to clip. I almost said don't jump in the pool with Christian McCaffrey. Don't jump in the ageist pool, okay? Christian McCaffrey is a transcendent talent at the running back position. He's the exact kind of running back that's going to age well. And I think we're going to, and this is just a theory, I don't have any basis for this, because as running backs transition more and more into a receiving role, you saw the Lions do this when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. They drafted him not really as a running back, but as a weapon, right? That they were going to use in the passing game. And that's great for fantasy football. I would assume that is also going to prolong some of these careers, because they're not going to be taking as many in between the tackles bullshit touches that we don't care about in fantasy football. And I could very much see that being the case for a guy like Christian McCaffrey, that he's going to have a couple 2-3 plus more years. I mean, I'll just say it right now. I think Christian McCaffrey's probably the next Derrick Henry, where all these people are going to try to predict, oh, this is the year. This is where he's going to fall off the cliff. He's going to get injured. He's going to, Barney at the bar is going to line up with his hot takes and fade Christian McCaffrey. And I'm just here to tell you, he's easily a top 5 running back in Dynasty, and clearly the number 1 player that you should draft in a redraft league, to me. What do you think?
Yeah, my sentiments were just echoed by you on Christian McCaffrey, and it's going to be that similar situation. The big difference to me with Christian McCaffrey is with what you described earlier, where he has never really been known to be that in between the tackles, goal line, short yardage grinder. Yes, he's played that role because he's a workhorse, but even going back to the early Panthers days, they were always a zone running scheme who were built on getting Christian McCaffrey outside of the tackles, if anything, at least outside of the guards. And he doesn't have that history of hits, and he also doesn't have that history of 300 plus carries. McCaffrey is a touch leader every year, but it's because of his work in the receiving game, getting him in open space to where if he, when he is getting tackled, he's getting hit less hard. He's getting defenders on their heels, on their hips, somewhere where they don't have all the momentum and the force. So Christian McCaffrey, I think it's going to be the same trend at a different level. We'll see when we get to Derrick Henry in our rankings that even though he's not necessarily that much older than Christian McCaffrey, he's still just put up a very good year in terms of fantasy points per game. He's fallen in our rankings. And so I think next year we'll see Christian maybe like RB7, and this dip will continue where as long as he is healthy and playing in this San Francisco 49ers offense, he's welcome on my team any day of the week. And talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, he did jump him in the rankings, and I certainly feel that that's justified. Gibbs finished as the RB8 in fantasy points per game and didn't really get unleashed until week 8 when David Montgomery went down. I don't know if that's the exact game when David Montgomery went down. Week 7 was the week I meant to mention, where he had 126 yards, a touchdown, and an RB3 performance on the week. Then even when David Montgomery came back, there were some issues, but these profiles, I'll talk about this more when we get to Devon Achane. These profiles almost always increase usage going into year 2. And I talked about weighted opportunities per game. Gibbs was at 14.7 last year, aggregate across the season. That's just shy of where Bijan Robinson was, just even shyer of where Breece Hall was. So he's getting an elite level of opportunity early on. He ranks incredibly highly in efficiency metrics like breakaway run rate, true yards per carry, juke rate. Not metrics that we depend on year over year, but metrics that show, especially early on in your career, how good of a playmaker are you? How good are you at your position? I was almost all the way through that take and would have been perfect for a clip potentially, and then just butchered it right at the finish line. But Jahmyr Gibbs is one of those profiles that we're going to see an opportunity increase. He's RB4 right now in redraft rankings, and he's a guy who, as long as this Lions offense maintains par year over year, he's going to be a top 5 asset.
Yeah. I mean, it was week 7 is when the genie got let out of the bottle, because David Montgomery before that, if you remember, had the huge game against Green Bay in week 4 where he scored 3 touchdowns. Then the next week at Carolina, he was the RB5, had a rough game against Tampa Bay where I suspect maybe something happened, but week 7 was the official game where he did not play in week 7. And then that's the game where Jahmyr Gibbs, you start to see, Jahmyr Gibbs finishes RB3, then the RB1, then the RB2, then the RB3, and the genie was just let out of the bottle. And any hope that I had of winning the bet that we made was just completely at the door, because the season started as I thought it might, that, they're not going to trust him right away. Maybe towards the end of the season, you should definitely take some in underdog and best ball, because once these week 17, important weeks come around, that's when he's probably going to be ramping up, and in the fantasy playoffs. But anyway, yeah, I completely like Jahmyr Gibbs is just the kind of player, and Christian McCaffrey too, that we're going to want in fantasy football. And so now it gets kind of weird, because we are torn here. Technically, Jonathan Taylor is our number, but it's really he just sneaks into the top 5 because we actually don't like how our averages came out. We don't have a 5, we have a 6. And so Jonathan Taylor is our consensus 6, and then I'll just throw up these next few here. Then Travis Etienne, and say what you want to as I'm throwing these guys up. So
Yeah,
Travis Etienne is number
I
6 technically,
I should
and
have
then
just put like a flat rank to just number
yeah,
the people 1 through 30 once I got the consensus, but I wanted to order it in terms of our kind of consensus opinion. But Jonathan Taylor, we can kind of start there real quick. And probably the most boring top 5 pick that you can make.
yeah,
But I think it's a good thing. You know, if Jonathan Taylor's a boring RB5, then maybe he's attainable right now. He was RB12 in fantasy points per game last year. Only had 8 touchdowns, where he had 12 and 20 his first 2 years. Struggled with a little bit of the injury bug. Lowest career year in receptions and total production metrics as a whole, only playing 10 games. But he gets Anthony Richardson, which, yeah, it could limit his upside a little bit, but this team's going to be playing at an unreal pace, and it's going to be a lot of opportunities for Jonathan Taylor to be scoring. This was really hard for me because going from Taylor, and I'm actually lower on ETN because you have ETN in your top 5. I want to have ETN in my top 5. I couldn't get him there. But A-Chain, oh, sorry, Taylor's our 6, right? No, Taylor's our 5. This is a really
yeah.
weird.
Taylor's
This is a really
yeah.
confusing set of rankings that we have. But
Well, yeah, it's just because we're so different in this area. Like
because
so
you have
so
ETN at
technically
5, I have
there's
A-Chain at 5.
consensus 5. Yeah, there's no consensus 5. There's a consensus 6, which is Jonathan Taylor. But yeah, like I have ETN at 5, you have him at 8. I have A-Chain at 9, and well, why don't we talk about Devon Achan,
Let's do
shall
it.
we? Because I have him at 9, you have him at 5. And this all comes down to touch opportunity and availability. Because there's no doubt, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Devon Achan is not explosive, because obviously he is. Because what we saw last year might be the future, like of how running backs are used in the NFL. But the problem is, and dare I say, this is, the cliche, that this is a player that's better in best ball, because I don't want to, I mean, obviously if you draft him highly in a redraft league in the second, third round, where you're probably going to have to take him, you're going to suffer weeks where he gets on the field 30% of the time because it's a Mostert week or it's a Jalen Wright week. Maybe, maybe he takes one to the house, maybe he doesn't. But we're talking, he played in 11 games last year. He got hurt. There were worries about him being undersized coming into the league. And now they draft another running back. Granted, it's on day 3, but it's Jalen Wright, a guy that we all loved before the NFL draft and that we thought should be a day 2 pick. And then, of course, you have Raheem Mostert there, again, with his own injury concerns. But I just don't know. I think Devon Achan is one of the hardest players to rank because he's got a lot of what you love. He's got the elite speed. I mean, clearly he's a dynamic playmaker. Best comparable player, Chris Johnson on PlayerProfiler. I think that's
Guy's pretty good.
pretty good, pretty spot on. But he's never going to be the most consistent player ever. Like, and so when I'm doing my rankings, I want something that I can depend upon. I don't want to go to the car garage and constantly like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take the Ferrari out today. It needs maintenance again. Give me like, and that's why I have Rashad White ahead of him. That's why I have ETN ahead of him. I've seen it from ETN. I've seen it from Rashad White. And we mostly agree. Like with you, I have Rashad White at 8. You have him at 7. So we just really differ with Achan. So talk me into Achan, because really the only thing that I can say, like if Achan puts together somehow a 17 game season, of what he did when he was on the field last year, then I'm dead wrong about my I'm completely dead ass wrong. But I don't think that's ever gonna happen with Devon Achane. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. So
Okay.
he was RB5 in terms of fantasy points per game last season, and what I just said about Gibbs applies to Devon Achane, where these running backs, we typically see them always get an opportunity increase into year 2. So I'm going to quote Ryan Heath, incredible analyst over at Fantasy Points. So I'm just going to read his tweet. We don't have to show it, but Devon Achane just had the most efficient rookie season ever and could well be the next Alvin Kamara. Among rookie RBs drafted rounds 1 through 3 who outperformed their weighted opportunity by plus 2.5 fantasy points per game or more. So essentially saying if he had 15 fantasy points per weighted opportunities per game, he had 17.5 or more fantasy points per game, that type of discrepancy. But 5 out of 5 of those running backs had a volume increase in year 2, and 4 out of 5 topped 20 fantasy points per game in year 2. So it's obviously a small sample. That's what fantasy football is built on. But running backs of Devon Achane's draft capital and initial performance in his rookie season, they see volume spikes in year 2. And it makes sense. Raheem Mostert is coming off of the most carries he's ever had in a season in his entire career. This is an injury-riddled running back who is well over the age curve that just had like nearly 400 carries over his past 2 seasons, if not more than 400 carries.
21 touchdowns last year.
That can't
21
happen
touchdowns.
again.
No, it can't. No.
Achane had 11, right? So crazy enough, I think it's reasonable to expect that Achane sustains 11 touchdowns because some of those 21 are going to stay with Raheem. Some of them are probably going to go, to some wide receivers. But Devon Achane, 11 weighted opportunities per game last year. I expect that to be closer to 14, a Gibbs-esque role. And with Achane's talent, I get that he had some injury concerns. I'm not willing to bet on that every year, because if you're wrong on Devon Achane, it could be costly. Rachaad White, good running back, great pass catcher, very relied on last year. It's a part of me feels like we're too sure that this incessant feed Rachaad White is going to happen with Dave Canales not behind the wheel. I still think Rachaad White is worthy of being up here. I have him high in my rankings as well, but I can't get over putting him above Devon Achane because he's not in as good of an offense. And unfortunately, he has not proved by any stretch of the definition that he is a more explosive playmaker than Devon Achane. So I'm going to have Achane in my top 5 until the wheels fall off. He's a short-term asset, in my opinion, but he's a short-term top 5 asset.
Interesting, because I suspect when we talk about Rachaad White, because Dynasty Football Key is in the chat. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. It's really good. He got Rachaad White at the 708 in a Superflex startup, and he was RB 14. See, I suspect that both of us are higher on Rachaad White than the public. I think the public is vastly underrating Rachaad White because I get it. Dave Canales is gone. And that who knows what that means? New offensive coordinators in there. I honestly don't know who it is. But Bucky Irving really is the RB2 there. And Bucky Irving is just a less explosive version of Rachaad White, is what he is. So I don't really see the opportunity. I think it's one of the safer picks to make in Dynasty. I really do. And the fact that he's going outside of the top 10, out of the top 12 is crazy to me. Like at that price, if that's the price on Rachaad White, and I assume that Devon Achane was drafted before that, like Devon Achan's like a shooting star, gonna give you 50 points in 1 week like he did last year, potentially. Rachaad White, while he didn't give you 50, he gave you 21, 15, 17.9, 27.9 when he was the running back 1 in week 9, and then a bunch of RB1 finishes through that time. Like, it's just, it's a classic example to me of the sexy, flashy Corvette versus the reliable, player in Rachaad White that's going to be healthy and he's going to be hovering around RB 12 to 15 with a spike week every once, like he's going to be a consistent producer for your fantasy team that is being undervalued, vastly undervalued in Dynasty and in redraft for that matter. So it's just like it might just be a conversation of how do you Dynasty? Like, do you like to take big risks? Then Devon Achan's your guy. If you like to be less risk averse, then Rachaad White's probably the player that you want to take. Do you think that's a fair assessment before we throw some more players up?
Yeah, no, for sure. If we want to talk about, who's a better value at cost, that's a completely different conversation, and one where
That's
I tend
that's a
to
good point.
start leaning over to Rachaad White. But and that's why we have rankings too, because when you see A-Chain and in our rankings, A-Chain and Rachaad White so close to each other, that immediately to us is like, okay, well, we're drafting Rachaad White every chance we can get in a dynasty startup because he's all the way up here, and that's not where he's getting drafted. So completely echoed on Rachaad White there.
Yeah. Dobsy in the chat here, 34. He says, I don't think it's that. I just think when somebody has a choice between White and whichever wide receiver is also available, that they're choosing the wide receiver. I guess that could, I mean, if you hate running backs like I do, so this episode's kind of a conflict for me. Yeah, I suppose that's possible, but there gets to a point in a draft where it's like, oh my God, it's the 7th round and Rachaad White's still available. How is this possible? All right, I'm gonna throw 2 more up, and then after I'll throw a few more up because we got this always happens to us because we get in these conversations and it gets us in trouble sometimes. And the really the main purpose of these rankings, Matt Babich, is so people can just pick apart our rankings is really the point of rankings, because there's so many nuances and variations like in drafts and strategies, and you can dynasty in a million different ways. But I'm going to throw up Saquon. We have Saquon as our RB. What would this be? 8, and James Cook is our RB. Or no, Saquon's our RB9 and James Cook is our RB10. I know you're a big. I don't really have a strong opinion here. I think Saquon is another one of these players that I feel is going to be really good in this Philadelphia system, but we saw DeAndre Swift see a career low in targets, touchdowns, receptions last year in this offense that I think, Jalen Hurts is there and doesn't really throw to the running back. So Saquon Barkley is going to be dependent on his breakaway run ability. The good news is that Philadelphia has a really good offensive line and Saquon Barkley's still really good. So I think that's like Saquon Barkley is another one of these, in my opinion, generational talents that people are going to have too low. And it was a real toss up for me putting Barkley, because I have him at 7, you have him at 11. Matt Babich is the ageist here. I have him right ahead of Rachaad White, back to back in my rankings. So just defend this 11 nonsense ranking in your rankings.
It is kind of nonsense. I don't think. I'm not gonna lie. Like I've been looking at it for the past few hours, and every time, first of all, I guarantee you, as soon as you put Saquon Barkley on that tier, like someone is going to get, like, right here in this video with Barkley and Cook on this screen, we're gonna hear from people in the comment section, in the actual comment section of the YouTube video. I know how this goes, but I think it is ageism. If I can go back and maybe finish these rankings before the show, I just didn't know how to shuffle them. because I do love James Cook. I think he's too high. I think if I would do it over on the fly, I would flip Barkley to 9 and James Cook to 11, because Barkley on the Eagles is a magical combination. Yes, we were a little bit disappointed in Swift last year, but we're talking about there's levels to this. And there's a reason why they brought in Swift, didn't necessarily use his skill set up to where we thought they would. And then they went and said, we're going to get an elite of an elite running back in Saquon Barkley. They're going to use him. His target share, however, may be the issue. So 2023, 15%, 17% in 2022, 13 in 2021, 12 in 2020, 14.8 in 2019, 21 in 2018. Those are historically high target shares, top 5 most years. If that dips down to 12 and Jalen Hurts is taking rushing touchdowns still, Saquon Barkley might be a big whiff at ADP in redraft leagues. So that's why it's hard for me to continuously push Saquon up. I love Saquon, always been one of his biggest fans. I just get worried about if there's going to be an opportunity squeeze in Philadelphia. If he were RB 25 in ADP or rankings, it wouldn't bother me a lick. But when you start talking about top 10 RBs, it can't be easy to just list off reasons why you might get a touch squeeze. That starts to present a scary situation. Cook is in an interesting spot where he could see his target share go up with the departure of Stephon Diggs. I would like to know, I haven't looked at this myself yet, admittedly. I would like to know what James Cook's splits were when Joe Brady took over, because the opportunities seemed to increase. So I wonder, not to be the small sample extended over a seasonal pace guy like I was with Christian Watson 2 years ago, or last year. But with James Cook, if we see that type of usage over the course of the season, he is closer to RB12 than he is RB19. So I think James Cook is close to the right spot here in RB10, but I think I may have pushed him up just a tad by putting him over Saquon Barkley at RB9. But the consensus fixes all, because Saquon Barkley is ahead of Cook in our rankings. But do you feel these same fears? You have Saquon Barkley at RB7. Do you have these same fears?
I would if it wasn't Saquon Barkley. I would if they didn't hand him a contract like they paid him pretty handsomely. So I assume they're going to have a plan for him. That is going to be, because I know DeAndre Swift's playing for the Bears, and I think DeAndre Swift's a really good player, but he's not in the same league as Saquon Barkley from a talent perspective. And Saquon Barkley, again, 27 years old. I feel like some people, again, we could extend this to the Christian McCaffrey conversation we were having, are going to try to see, is this the year where Saquon's no good? But this Philadelphia offensive line, I mean, you talk about a complete shift from the dreck that he was playing behind with the Giants, and no field stretchers, none. Quarterback play, terrible. Daniel Jones went out early in the season. So nothing went right for Saquon last year, nothing whatsoever. And he was RB13 and RB9 in fantasy points per game. Granted, he only played in 14 games. 3.9 yards per carry. The true yards per carry, number 51 amongst running backs, terrible. But I can explain some of that away, because I can say, well, the offensive line was awful. And the stack, he was facing a lot of people in the box because the quarterback play was terrible. Number 2 in stuffed runs in the NFL amongst running backs. So I can explain a lot of it away, and this should be a completely different situation for him. And I think he still has the juice, because he ranked number 8 in breakaway runs last year, playing behind that offensive line. I think there's a real chance that he climbs up into the top 3 in breakaway runs. And if he does with more space with the Eagles in that offensive line, he has a real chance to be a top 5 running back. But the shitty part is I wish that the tush push wasn't there for Saquon Barkley. I kind of wish there was going to be more receptions for him in this offense, because I think the problem is he's going to be too heavily dependent on the breakaway runs. But he has the upside to absolutely take advantage and just cash in on some of those breakaway runs. So it's I don't know if this is a perfect metaphor or whatever, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like I like parts of it, like it's completely different situation, but there are parts of the situation that I go, Jalen Hurts is not going to throw him the ball. If they get in the red zone, it's Jalen Hurts is going to run it in and not Saquon. You know what I mean? But I assume they're probably going to use him more than they use DeAndre Swift in the red zone. So I'm officially I'm a buy. I have my buy sticker on Saquon Barkley after much debate, but yeah, I'm torn about it, to be sure, and which is why I have him ranked as the RB 7 in fantasy and Dynasty right now.
There we go.
All right. Well, we should probably take a break, and this is what we always do. We're a bunch of gas bags here. So click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned to the end, because we will give you 11 through 25 after this message from the Podfather about the FFPC.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February, and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
Promo code UNDERWORLD, and I was just about to put up the last player in this, I guess, this modified tier. It's really just 11 through 15 in Josh Jacobs. So here we go, 11 through 15. Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams, Isaiah Pacheco, Jonathan Brooks, Josh Jacobs, 11 through 15 in our rankings. And the biggest difference, wow, we don't really have a big difference here in this tier, because we have Kyron Williams, we both have him at 12. I have Kenneth Walker at 11. You have him at 10. Who's your 11? Oh, you have Saquon at 11. That's 11. Right.
Yep.
Saquon, big mistake there. But any player in particular? I mean, do you want to talk about Kyron Williams here? I mean, like, he's kind of a hot one. Is there a player that stands out to you in this range?
I'll talk about Kyron Williams first, because we did promise some ambiguous backfields, and maybe the Rams aren't necessarily the most ambiguous backfield, but recently there's been a lot of Blake Corum's steam, and it's because of his availability. Kyron Williams had a foot issue that he seems to be over. He's back on the practice field doing what he does. But in that short window, Blake Corum got pumped up to the moon with that report that they wanted him to have a 3-down skill set, which of course you do. Like, why wouldn't you want him to have that? But
yeah, I'm pretty sure every coach wants every running back to have a 3-down skill set. I don't think any coach wants, you know what? We could teach this running back to be a 3-down running back, and use them in every situation possible and have him be the most versatile player in the world. But we're not, we're just going to use him as a pass catcher. We don't need him to block or. Yeah, it's that was the most ridiculous thing in the world. So anyway, continue.
But yeah, Kyron is a guy who I'm starting to think, okay, maybe we're overthinking Kyren. So he was RB8 from a seasonal ADP. He was RB2 last year. So it's becoming more clear to me that Corum was more of a luxury pick. Like, we did not have an RB2 behind Kyren. Our offense struggled when Kyren wasn't available. We need somebody to be able to play relief. So to me, it's like a Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker situation where we all like Corum. We all know what we think he can do with an opportunity share, but he's probably going to play few relief snaps. If Kyren catches an injury, maybe he ramps up a little bit, but Kyren still has top 5 upside in this Rams offense. Nearly a 12% target share last year in a Stafford offense. That's going to be valuable. So Kyren, I think we might be overthinking. I'm certainly not moving him outside of my top 12 in the immediate future. We'll get your thoughts on Kyren in a second, but if I'm going to usurp anybody over Kyren Williams, it's Jonathan Brooks. Like, I have him at 13. I want to go higher. I want to go higher. Price is right. I want to go higher than RB13 because I think the sky's the limit with Jonathan Brooks. I can talk about him in a bit, but real quick, your thoughts on Kyren Williams?
It's an interesting situation because I don't think he's going to get the snap share nor the opportunity share that he got last year. 83%, 83.9% snap share, 78.4% opportunity share. I would assume Blake Corum's going to eat into that, and he's going to be closer to 60 to 70% on the snap share. So the volume, I don't think, is going to be there the way it was last year. So I think this ranking is just about right. I don't think he's going to fall off the map. I don't think he's not talented, but just be careful about this Blake Corum stuff because Blake Corum is going to be a rookie. He's going to I would just caution everybody who's going all in and getting a bunch of Blake Corum. If I suppose if the price is right, go for it. But he's getting steamed up quite a bit, and I would be tempted to actually sell Blake Corum with the way the price is. I'd be more the way I dynasty is I try to sell players at the top of the market, and there's a real possibility that this is Kyren Williams' backfield. He takes about 60-70% of the opportunity. Yeah, does it come down from last year? Sure, it does. But Blake Corum, plays a role, but he doesn't take over this backfield the way that some people are suspecting that he will. So again, Kyren Williams has proved it last year. I suspect that he's going to have every opportunity to prove that he's the lead running back. So I think we need to, as my favorite player in the world, Aaron Rodgers once said, RELAX with this Blake Corum stuff.
Sell Blake Corum after Kyren Williams has a 47% snap share game because of a hamstring or something, and Corum gets his first touchdown or a second touchdown. The bullish case for Corum, real quick, is that even Zach Charbonnet maintained value over last year. So there's value in being that handcuff plus where the rookie drafters still think that you have talent, some untapped potential. So I think Corum, you can sell him now. I think there's going to be better windows in season.
Yeah, I'll rephrase what I said.
I'm not disagreeing with what you said.
No. Because I agree with that. I think there's going to be a window in season, and this is generally what you should do. I think this is good general advice, is to sell veterans and players in season as opposed to out of season if you can. Now, if you get a great offer, obviously you want to make trades out of season as well if they're the right trades to make. But yeah, when he tweaks that foot or the hamstring or a minor injury, that and Blake Corum gets that 50% snap share, that's probably the moment that you want to capitalize on, because then we're talking, because right now it's probably what, a second plus a nice play. I don't know, I'm just speculating, but that if that happens, people are gonna just go crazy, and you might be talking a future first for Blake Corum. Like, crazier things have happened. So you're absolutely right that there's going to be a better selling window probably in season if that happens. With Kyron Williams, like he misses a game or two, which is absolutely possible. But I don't want to change the subject too heavily, but I do think we need to talk about Isaiah Pacheco. I'll let you come back to Jonathan Brooks, but Isaiah Pacheco last season was the RB15. He was the RB14 in fantasy points per game. He saw his reception total go from 13 to 44. I just want to point this out. In the playoffs, in the most important games, I'll shout out a couple weeks. Week 17 against Cincinnati, 7 targets, 7 receptions. He was the RB2 that week in championship week. In the playoffs, in the AFC Championship game, 4 targets. In the Super Bowl, 6 targets. So when it mattered the most, who were they targeting out of the backfield? Isaiah Pacheco. I think Isaiah Pacheco, and then I'm getting ahead of myself. Then you look at what the Chiefs did this offseason, which is really nothing in the way of adding a running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the RB2. Last season, Isaiah Pacheco saw a 61% snap share, a top 10 opportunity share, number 8 amongst running backs. I could see that going up, especially as Mahomes continues to mature as a passer and continues to, maybe cut it down on the rushing a little bit. Once upon a time, Andy Reid loved old school fantasy gamers will remember Brian Westbrook. What did Andy Reid love to do in that West Coast system? Throw the screens to Brian Westbrook. And I don't think Isaiah Pacheco has been fully utilized as a pass catcher the way that he could be. And I think this offseason has shown us that the Chiefs have every intention of making him the bell cow running back in what could be the best offense in the NFL. With now that they've added Xavier Worthy and Marquise Hollywood Brown on the outside, and they have all this speed, that's going to open up the middle of the field for Isaiah Pacheco. It's going to open up running lanes. It's going to open up the pass out of the backfield. Like, it's going to be him one-on-one with the linebacker, and I like Pacheco's chances. Like, he's going to be a matchup problem for defenses. Like, they're going to, oh my God, we got to worry about Xavier Worthy burning us deep, Hollywood Brown deep, Kelsey over the middle. Oh my God. And then, Isaiah Pacheco's probably going to be the 4th player that they're going to be worried about stopping. And I think he's going to have a huge year in this offense, but we have him conservatively ranked, I think, at RB13. Like I said, he finished as the RB15 last year and the RB14. I think he's being drafted at his floor. I really do. And he's still a young player with a lot of juice left, 24 years old. If Isaiah Pacheco is not a dynasty buy, I don't know who is.
Yeah, I mean, to quickly counterpoint, they just added 2 pass catchers this offseason, have another pass catcher going into year 2. So I can't put Jonathan Brooks over Isaiah Pacheco because Brooks is going to have a 12 to 15% target share, and I think Pacheco is going to still settle around 10, even though he hasn't. I agree that he took over the pass catching role last year, but it's going to be a different offense next year to where Pat doesn't have to check down as much. And so I think the upside's definitely there for Pacheco. I think it's close between him and Brooks, but I think Brooks at the end of the day is going to have more opportunities, and Pacheco is going to have a pretty nice amount of touchdowns to massively outproduce RB13. So I'm with you there, but I'm not quite as bullish on Pacheco as you are.
Fair enough. All right, so I'm gonna throw up the next. All right, so I'm going back and forth here. So DeAndre Swift is up next for us.
I can feed you the names if it's easier.
Kamara. Yeah, who's after Kamara?
Spears, Mixon, and Benson.
Spears, Mixon, and Benson.
We got a big discrepancy on Mr. Mixon.
Oh, well, how do we now?
Well, he is your RB. He's your RB23. He is my RB16.
Maybe I'm being an ageist here because Mixon, a new situation. You just never. I mean, he's the clear running back there. I mean, who am I kidding? He was the RB6 last year. Yeah, I'm probably. I guess the only thing that I can point to is the efficiency, right? Number 40 in true yards per carry. But I would assume the volume is going to be there for him. He's one of my favorite redraft targets as far as like I like to open up with receiver. And then if you want to say he's a dead zone running back, go ahead, because all he's done as a quote unquote dead zone running back is finish RB5, RB7, RB11 in fantasy points per game the last 3 years. So, yeah, and he's going to get receptions out of the backfield. I guess my one concern would be there's, for lack of a better way to say this, a lot of mouths to feed in Houston. But it's going to be
cliche alert. Cliche alert. Cliche alert.
Cliche alert. Yeah, a lot of mouths to feed. How many cliches do you think I could say in one sentence? Maybe that could be another goal. Yeah, I still think that it's going to be a great offense that you're going to want pieces of. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm probably too low on Joe Mixon. So I'm going to concede this point before you make it, but just hammer it home. Why should Joe Mixon be 16th? Ahead of Swift, ahead of ahead of Swift, ahead of Alvin Kamara, ahead of Tajay Spears.
I can't
go ahead.
In the short term, I don't have Swift over Mixon in redraft this year. Kamara is close to where I draw the line. I don't have Spears over Mixon in redraft. And we play in 2 to 3 year windows. So I think Mixon is a top 15 running back for the next 2 seasons. So he's got to be around top running back 15 in my dynasty rankings. He is, I'm guesstimating here, but he's a couple years older than Swift. He's, I think, a little bit younger than Alvin Kamara. They're pretty close in age, but it's all about the touches. You can go back through Mixon's entire history. He's never been an efficient running back. That's never been his MO. He gets a lot of touches. He's just always been that bell cow guy. And yeah, maybe his efficiency numbers are because he's taking a lot of up the middle carries, because he's always had, a near 80% opportunity share like he had in 2023. But he was 7th in expected fantasy points per game last year. Just got the short end of the stick, especially with Joe Burrow not suiting up for a good portion of that season. But he's going into this Texans offense where he's going to get a lot of red zone touches. The Texans could not find a way to punch it in at the goal line quite a few times last year. As somebody who had Stroud in a couple of leagues and is pretty invested in that, they struggled in the red zone to convert into touchdowns. And that's, in my mind, a big reason why they went out and got Joe Mixon, because he has the propensity to score touchdowns. He has a 16 and 12 touchdown seasons on his resume, 9, 8, and 9 in 3 other seasons as well. So he's a perennial near 10 touchdown player. This is a little bit of recency bias, sure, but I think Mixon's a top 15 running back for the next 2 seasons.
That's I think I'm gonna have to make an adjustment for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw up the last 5. I think we have Najee. This would be a good thing to talk about to end the show, and that's the Pittsburgh backfield, because we have them literally ranked back to back. I have Jaylen Warren over Najee Harris, and you have Najee Harris ranked ahead of Jaylen Warren. So why don't you make the case for Najee, and why don't I make the case for Warren? And that could be a nice way to end the episode. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is a nice way to end the episode, except for the fact that I think I'm already, similarly to what you just did with Mixon and what I did with Barkley earlier, I'm already ready to concede him a little too low on Jaylen Warren, because I'm just kind of noticing, and this is why I hate rankings, because it's like ranking movies. Like, I love all of them so much. Why are you forcing me to choose between one or the other? And then you blink and all of a sudden Jaylen Warren's at RB26 and you're like, wait a minute, that's not necessarily what I thought was going to happen, because Jaylen Warren is going to be a Steeler next year and Najee Harris isn't. So that's the biggest argument. I meant you give your Jaylen Warren argument first before I end up giving it for you on accident.
Well, he's the better running back.
There we go. And well, let's wrap up.
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, you look at when Najee Harris was good, right, in his rookie season, and I feel like I've said this a million times, so hopefully it isn't just, cause everybody to get bored and leave the show. But when he was good as a rookie at RB6 in fantasy points per game, he had 74 receptions. And I think he led, let me pull this up real quick. Yeah, he was number 1 in targets amongst running backs. He hasn't come close to that since 2021. Last season, he was number 33 in targets. You know who's a better pass catcher than Najee Harris? And this is just pure numbers, because they use him this way, is Jaylen Warren, because he was number 5 amongst running backs in targets, despite playing on just 49% of the snaps. 49% snap share, number 35 amongst running backs in snap share, number 6 in true yards per carry, number 7 in yards per touch, number 5 in evaded tackles, number 1 in juke rate, number 3 in breakaway run rate. I mean, number 3 in yards created per touch. You go down any metric you want to list that matters for fantasy football, Jaylen Warren's better. So I don't think this is really much of a debate. This is a hill that I'll die on, and I don't care what Matty Kiwoom says. He's a Najee Harris truther, because his argument is, and this, I don't know if there's anything to this. I'm going to say no, because I would assume that NFL coaches, yes, actually there is something to this, because sometimes NFL coaches just do stupid things. They just play players like, oh yeah, he's a real grinder. I like those running backs. They just run. They get up there and then between the tackles and they just run it. They run people over. So stupid. And my throat, like doing that voice really hurt my throat. So
that was impressive. You should do some voice work.
Yeah. Well, I'm dead now. I'm dead. But yeah, that's what they think. Maybe I need to go a little bit lower, and then it won't be as painful on the throat. But yeah, they like, just football, like old school football. We should bring back the wishbone. It's like that. Like some football coaches are like, oh my god, please stop. Because Jaylen Warren's clearly shown you that he's the better player, and it's not like the snap share is completely out of whack. Like Najee Harris it was basically like a 50-50 split last year. Najee Harris 52.7%, Jaylen Warren 49.1%. So it's not like we can't see this coming. Jaylen Warren is also 25. Najee Harris is 26. Like he's just a little bit younger. And you mentioned the contract. Like Najee Harris was drafted in 2021. He's entering his 4th year in the league. Do you think that they're going to pick up the 5th year option? I'll let you in on a secret. They're not. They're not going to pick up the 5th year option on Najee Harris. Just to let everybody know. So he's going to be a free agent, and who knows what's going to happen to a 26-year-old running back, going to be a 27-year-old running back this time next year, that doesn't really catch passes out of the backfield very well. That's not really efficient. Yeah, Najee Harris is one of the biggest sells in Dynasty there ever has been, and there ever was. Like, it's just the red flashing lights are blinking so brightly, and the sirens are going out. The only hope that he has, is Mike Tomlin and his old school football, just grind it up in there. And now these sounds are oddly sexual, so I'll stop. I just stop that. And somehow I had it, and then I lost it. And
diminishing returns.
Now all I can think about is a football coach that's just sexually aroused by the wishbone formation. So, anywho, any final comments on this last group of players? We talked about Derrick Henry. I guess we have him down at 24. This is why I hate running backs. This is like, if I'm a win now team and I've constructed my team the right way, I'll just go out and get Derrick Henry. I'll just go trade for him because he's going to have a good year with the Ravens. Like, I'll as my RB2 on my team, RB3 maybe. Yeah, I'll go trade a late second round rookie pick would easily get that done. Well, it's too perfect of a move to go get Derrick Henry and just use him for a year and win the icing on top of the cake, the cherry on top of the sundae is the RB position. That's what this is. That's what Derrick Henry is to me. So there you go. I don't know. I feel like I'm sucking all the air, taking all the airtime. Like,
can I talk about Brian Robinson now? Are we ready?
Yeah. I need to shut up. Go ahead.
All right, you're too low on Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson is my RB20. I'm here to tell chat, everyone, viewers, look at me in the eyes. Look at me and tell me with a straight face that you think Austin Eckler is going to vulture opportunity from Brian Robinson. With a straight face, tell me that. Didn't think so. Couldn't do it. It's not happening. They signed him on a veteran-esque deal where they recognize that Austin Eckler is not the bell cow that he once was. And he has actually been long looking for a backfield partner that's effective. He was saying it on podcasts, like, I need a 1B to spell me a little bit. And now we're starting to see that age creep up to Austin Eckler. Yes, there is that avenue where Eckler was simply hurt with his ankle injury all year, and he is better than we think. I think the fact that he's drafted as an RB30 in the RB30s right now in seasonal drafts tells us that the market is already factoring this in. But let's look at Brian Robinson, who is the RB22 in fantasy points per game last year in a god-awful Washington offense. He finished 5th among running backs in yards per route run, 32nd with only an 8% target share. Dan Quinn just actually went up and talked about how they want to use Brian Robinson in the passing game. So per Coach Speak Index, that's something we should be taking seriously. He also finished 15 in yards per touch, 7th in yards created per touch. So he was efficient. He has 85th percentile speed as a running back. He has the receiving chops going back to his Alabama days. And even in the midst of only having 5 goal line touches, he was 31st in red zone touches among running backs, still had 9 touchdowns in that offense. Insert him into a Cliff Kingsbury offense, which I am old enough to remember what Cliff Kingsbury did for James Conner. That was a top 10 RB season. And I don't think it's crazy to say that in a vacuum at their respective points in their careers that Brian Robinson is just as talented as James Conner in that situation. He now gets a mobile quarterback who may have to check it down more often than we'd like because of a potential lack of talent in the receiving core. So, and another thing, Cliff Kingsbury offenses run the damn ball in the red zone. They are known for that. So Brian Robinson is going to get an increase in opportunity next year. He was 19th in opportunity share last year. I expected to be closer to 15 when he's sitting at about 65% of the total opportunity. And he has top 15 upside. He potentially has RB1 upside, considering what we've seen in this role in the past. And no, it's not DeMont over B-Rob. It's not. And
It is.
No, it's not. And the reason it's
It
not,
is. Yeah.
no, but the reason it's not is because Brian Robinson isn't competing with Jameer motherfucking Gibbs. I sat there like, do I want to cuss? Do I want to censor this? And then I ended up
Nah, you can't censor anything. I just made odd sexual noises coming from an old school coach that probably wears his pants too high.
There's no chance in hell.
I already did that on the show. I'm channeling my inner Alan Seslowski here.
There's no chance in hell.
If we become, 80% of what what the content Alan puts out there, we can retire right now.
Okay, actually, now that you mentioned that, did you hear how he led the Sound of Truth podcast last week?
No,
just was like, yeah, sorry, I'm a little groggy. I had afternoon delight, and like just dropped that for us all to just for us all to know. But the reason is because there is no chance in hell that David Montgomery has a 65% opportunity share next year. It is not going to happen. And talent doesn't care about your opportunity. Opportunity doesn't care about your talent. I don't care if you think David Montgomery is a better running back than Brian Robinson. It doesn't matter. If Brian Robinson's getting more opportunity, he's more likely to score more fantasy points. So it's not DeMont over Brian Robinson. And if you want to make another bet, Seth, I'm all for it.
DeMont, I'll take that. DeMont, just straight fantasy points.
Fantasy points per game. We're not doing this again.
Oh, okay.
Minimum.
Fantasy points per game? I might have won the bet. I'll have to check this.
You may have. We had an injury clause, which I don't know if David Montgomery
I was gonna
games.
I was gonna win that 14.8. No, I didn't win this.
I don't think you did.
No, there's no way.
But I'll take Brian Robinson in fantasy points per game over David Montgomery. With if either of them play less than, you can pick the number, X number of games. If either of them don't hit X number of games, we void the bet. If they both clear the number, we take their production as at face value for the bet. All right. This is the easiest money clip it, chat. Dub. Common Babbage dub.
You want to hear my theory about this?
I would love for you to. I would love to.
The Commanders are going to be bad. And say what you want to about Austin Eckler. He's the better pass catching running back. And he's going to be used a lot more than you think. And so, and David Montgomery, this Detroit Lions offense is good enough to support two running backs. And so just so the chat is aware, these are cumulative, if I can speak, rankings. So I have Montgomery actually ranked ahead of Brian Robinson here. So although how do I have my guy David Montgomery down at RB26? He needs to be.
Yeah. Let the chat know, since the rankings are behind the screens, that I have David Montgomery in our rankings one spot higher than Seth does. So it's just that you have Brian Robinson at RB29 rather than RB20, but let the record show that I am actually higher on David Montgomery than Seth is at the current moment.
I can't let that. I need to be higher on David Montgomery. So that's shameful. I'm ashamed of myself, is what I am. So those are our RB rankings. Thank you, chat. Thank you, Go Gin. You never had it. Grind it up, baby. I don't quite know what that means. Demont. Yep. Youth hate me. The youth hates me. He wants me to take it. That's weird.
Take the bet is what he meant.
Oh, take it. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, any final thoughts? I'll get rid of this screen here. And then put back up some of this stuff before we end the show. But any plugs, anything to say before we get out of here, Mr. Babbage?
Yeah, so I mentioned draft season's coming up, so it's almost time for the draft kit. So just be on the lookout. It's almost that time of the year. Seth and I are both putting in some work for that, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. Just had an article drop on Monday I took a look at keep trade cuts, consensus, crowdsourced rankings, compared them to sleepers, ADP for Superflex startup drafts, and found some interesting values that you can draft in your startup league. So go to playerprofiler.com/articles to read my latest there. Another article that'll be coming out in the next 1 to 2 weeks, depending on when I can find time to quick get it done, is ambiguous backfield. So we talked about it a little bit today. I'm going to go more in depth. We'll talk about the Steelers. We'll talk about the Titans. I can't remember all of the ones on the list, but essentially just going to give my point of view on the ambiguous backfields this season and where I stand, what I expect for the 2024 season. So be on the lookout for that as well. Will not be on Player Profiler today, this Saturday, but next Saturday, back as usual, 6 p.m. Central on Saturday on the Player Profiler News YouTube channel and the Profiler_NFL Twitter. And you can find my all this on my Twitter at Babbage_Matt10.
Yeah, go follow Matt there. Go follow me at Seth_DIEWOLD. Dewald, not Dieworld. Not DeWald. Dewald. That's how you say it, just so everybody's aware. But it's not, it's not a source of contention or anything like that. It's been mispronounced my whole life. I cannot believe that somebody over a PA announcement system said Dieworld. My last name was Dieworld. Anywho, go follow me on Twitter. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can see more content from me there. I put out a thread today, so go check that out about RBs that I'm targeting in Dynasty startup drafts. I'm going to be getting into some of those here later on in June. So that's really about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there's a little number, and I'm probably not supposed to say it, that we hit today. But you never know what can happen. Sometimes when you reach these milestones, I know this is hard for people to believe, but some people will. So like, let's say we announce the number that we hit today, and we're celebrating it. Like, some people will go and unsubscribe just so we're below that number. So we're waiting till we're well above that number to announce it. So that's exciting. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. And until next time, nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. Wiseman for Heisman. We'll see you later, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.